You're listening to The Art of Procurement, episode 131.
Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great week so far, and thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Art of Procurement. And today I'm joined by Tim Meester. Tim is the Senior Director of Procurement and Sustainability for Best Buy. And for listeners outside of North America, Best Buy is an almost $40 billion revenue provider of technology products, services, and solutions. They're all anchored around more than 1,000 big box retail locations that they have across Canada, the US, and Mexico. And Tim has a deep background in supply chain management. You'll actually hear him talk a little bit more about that in the show. And he's on his second tour of duty with Best Buy. So originally he was a manager of supply chain management at Best Buy. He then spent 6 years supporting supply chain transformation initiatives at Toys R Us, and then 18 months with GS1, who are the international global standards organization, before returning to Best Buy in 2011. So what's that? 6 years ago, and a new career that really brought together supply chain management and procurement. And I was connected with him through the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. And today marks the second in a two-part series looking at CSR and the role the actions that procurement can play to drive what I would call profitable sustainability throughout the supply chain. And when I talked to Tim, I was also really impressed by his and his team's efforts to deliver value through other sources, sustainability being just one, but others such as leading the innovation conversation with stakeholders. So in the conversation, I'll actually ask Tim, and you'll hear me asking Tim, to share the actions that Best Buy Procurement is taking to bring other sources of value, and importantly how Best Buy actually incentivizes their teams to enable them to focus on more than just cost savings alone. So with all that being said, I hope you enjoy today's show, and let's roll the tape. So hi there everybody, and welcome to today's Art of Procurement interview. And as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm joined today by Tim Meester. Tim is Senior Director of Procurement and Sustainability at Best Buy. So Tim, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Phil. I appreciate it.
And I'm really happy that you're able to join us today. And the first question I have is one that I like to ask often, is so people can start to get to know you a little bit more. And that's, how did you find yourself in procurement itself? Was it something that you went after, or is it something that kind of came to you?
That's interesting. I think it's a little bit of both, actually. Mm-hmm. Most of my career has been in a variety of leadership positions across supply chain, even before the industry of supply chain took shape, I guess you'd say. And, as I was plotting out my career, I realized that, most of mine was spent in logistics type areas, and the procurement might be important for me to have. So it was another exciting piece to the puzzle, if you will. So as I was looking for a procurement opportunity, Best Buy was also looking for someone to stand up a procurement function that could also bridge the gap and build a relationship with the logistics group within our company. And it was, so we kind of sought out each other, if you will. So I've been here 5 years, and things seem to be going really well, and I'm branching out into other areas, and I love it.
I think when we talked before we actually hit the record button, you were telling me that you came in, I think, around the logistics and with a transportation focus, and then expanded that remit over time. I just wonder if you could share a little bit more about your role and your scope today at Best Buy.
Yeah, I did start off with the supply chain focus, specifically transportation and distribution, and it was a fairly small team as they built that out. Mm-hmm. And we had great success. I hired some people that loved what they did and were very passionate about transportation and distribution. And, we found success, and we found low-hanging fruit, of course, and went after that first and delivered some results. And as a result of that, as our department continued to change, I took on other responsibilities. It took me outside that comfort zone that I had. So now I have corporate services, which includes things like our human resources area and benefits and call centers and various finance functions. I do still have supply chain, which includes transportation and distribution. I now have home delivery and consumer services. If you think of our Geek Squad brand, which would include refurbishment of devices and parts for devices and so forth. I've included enterprise supplies, which is office products and packaging materials and all of those sexy things. And recently took over fleet operations for our vehicles and material handling equipment. So, several of these things have allowed me to learn much more about our company and what we do and how to add value in different places.
When we talked as well before, you were telling me, and you had a lot of stories around the value of the teams that you build and the strength of the teams that you build. And I sense that building teams is really important, kind of central to what it is that you do and how you're able to bring value to Best Buy. I wonder if you could just expand a little bit on your approach to building strong teams and some of the experiences that you've had that have maybe shaped how you go about doing that, how you look at people to select and why you see that as being so important.
Absolutely. I think early on in management, I tended to manage and dictate and try to do a lot of things on my own and realized that I was most effective when I was doing things that I absolutely loved. So I believe that more than anything, each person in my team needs to love coming to work every day, or if not every day, most days at a minimum. I can hire someone with a passion for their business, someone whose eyes light up and they sit on the edge of their seat when they talk about it. If I do that, they will undoubtedly succeed beyond my expectations. It's easier for me to harness that passion than it is to create it in somebody. So I tend to hire people that love the subject matter, find ways to keep that interesting for themselves.
How does that then impact when you think about procurement? When I was certainly pursuing my career on the practitioner side, my strategy was always to be a generalist. So, understanding the principles, being able to apply those principles to a variety of different categories. But that didn't necessarily mean that I knew everything about the categories or even, frankly, loved the categories that I was working in. Has that changed your approach to who you bring in? Bringing in people who are maybe specialists in a certain area and teaching them procurement because that's what they know and that's what they love? Or is it very situational based on the category and the importance of the category that you're working on?
I think I'll address that in a couple ways. So first of all, I would say that throughout my career, I've often started with a very small team and very large responsibilities. And so when I started here, it was the same situation. That was true at Best Buy, and it has been several times throughout my career. But when I hired, for example, a driven, passionate individual from a local transportation brokerage firm to handle my transportation category, guess what? He succeeded at engaging the clients and their leaders, making their lives easier, raising their performance, and all the while delivering savings, which is his primary function. Yep. And ultimately, he landed the top transportation position within our company. And, he loves transportation. He lives and breathes it. And that's a key ingredient for his success. Now, it's critical that we also have seasoned experts who leverage their experience in sourcing and negotiation and contracting and client engagement. Those folks are the strength and stamina of our team. Yeah. And the way I look at it, curiosity is the key element that we look for there. And I apply that to myself as well. Built on strong procurement discipline, curiosity allows us to venture into all kinds of categories and emerging technologies that are foreign to us, but that passion for learning all aspects of our business and the ability to apply those disciplines, that creates a dynamic way that we can create value for our clients and our company.
Right. And is that what you look at then, that curiosity as being the difference maker, if you will, for somebody who's looking to stand out, really kind of position themselves as a potential future leader or current leader within the procurement space? They have to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not in our job hiring guides, the questions that our company hands us for an interview. That's one of those things that you just have to detect in an individual. And if, a good test for me is if I'm interviewing somebody for any type of sourcing position within our group, and if I start talking about something that would not seem real sexy to somebody, the sourcing or doing a bid for our waste management services.
Right.
If they go, oh yeah, that would be really cool. I can imagine all the things you could do in that. Then I've got somebody who's kind of geeky, if you will, and willing to really engage and expose all the interesting parts of that.
And that's, I think, really important when, as a leader, you're kind of figuring out who are the people you want to invest a lot of your time in, and who are, I don't know, who are the ones that have that potential to step up and take future leadership positions, because given the complexity of some of the things that we work with, it's not necessarily possible to have expertise in everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I expect that expertise to come from the individuals and what they learned from working with our business clients.
So I want to move on a little bit, and the focus of our conversation, actually later in the interview, is to talk about your approach to sustainability. It's part of actually a two-part series that we have in the run-up to the SPLC, the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council's annual conference next month. But before I do it, I actually wanted to take a step back and think more broadly about value beyond savings. Because I think, one, sustainability is such a big piece of that, but also when we talked before we recorded, I was just really impressed with some of the work that you're doing at Best Buy to kind of broaden the mind of what is possible for procurement, some of the things that procurement should be doing. And I don't see that all the time. So I really wanted to kind of have a little bit of a conversation about that. And as a setup, I guess, first of all, what is your vision for the role of procurement at Best Buy?
It's a great question. And I would just start with the fact that I don't like constraints when it comes to scope.
Yeah.
And I've never been that way. I like to do my job very, very well and make sure that, what is defined within my scope is executed flawlessly.
Yeah.
Or as flawlessly as possible. And then I like to remove those boundaries and go beyond that. So I believe we each can have an impact considerably beyond our scope with the right approach and the right information.
Mm-hmm.
Procurement at Best Buy, to directly answer your question, it's essential to our survival. It's an element of continuous improvement that continues to unlock value from our current business. It secures our future as we invest in new ways of doing things and new services and products and so forth. And how we save money on our current business allows us to invest in those new things.
Right.
And it opens our clients' eyes to other important factors like sustainability and human rights in our supply chain that they might not be thinking about when they have their heads down at their desk or they're in meetings all day, every day, just trying to keep the business running.
Yeah.
They might not be thinking about human rights violations in our indirect supply chain. Right. So we have an inherent obligation to add that to the mix, and that helps us to become a true trusted advisor for that client and have purpose behind what we do.
How is that typically responded to? So most of the organizations, when you're starting to think a little bit more holistically about the role procurement can play, the people that we talk to who are used to a procurement organization that maybe just haven't had that, either the vision or the desire to challenge and push themselves. Do you get pushed back, or do you find that people within the organization are kind of welcoming it with open arms because they'll take the help that they can get?
I'd say it's a mixed bag. Some of our clients would prefer that we just execute what they ask us to execute, and perform the more administrative function and make sure that we're mitigating risk as we need to. I think some are very interested in the greater community that we serve and our purpose and the role that we can play as Best Buy and the footprint that we have, not only in the United States and in North America with our stores and our operations, but with our supply base overseas. So it's it's really a mix, and that's that continuous journey for us to educate our clients about other aspects of their business that they should be thinking about. And and some of that comes back to the risk management piece too. So if I'm procuring uniforms for our associates in the stores, and the factory that's producing those in Bangladesh has an issue, like we've heard so often, it's also a reputation risk for Best Buy. So it kind of falls into two things. It's just the right thing to do. Plus, there is reputation risk and a financial risk associated with that. So, there's a pretty broad, comprehensive story that we can tell, and it's pretty hard to ignore that.
Right. When you think of different value levers, you talked about a couple there, and something that always comes to my mind is innovation. Maybe it's just something that's been on my mind more often recently in some of the interviews that I've done, but some of the things I'm doing outside of the interviews. And you talked a little bit about, I think your philosophy was that, a lot of the people in the business, they've got their heads down. They don't necessarily have the ability to understand some of the disruptions that are occurring in their markets that ultimately impact what they can buy. I wonder if you could talk to how you kind of view innovation and supplier-led innovation and procurement's role, and then again, how you're able to drive that conversation with stakeholders and influence stakeholders, that you really understand what's out there and you can actually help them from a thinking differently rather than just executing.
Yeah, I think the primary role that we play, I'll get that out of the way and then I'll answer your question. Primarily, we're a trusted advisor for our clients, and we're expected to mitigate risk while we're driving business performance, both financially and operationally, and to make sure we can support, their objectives. Secondarily, our team's heavily engaged in those industries. I've got members of my team right now that are at a couple different industry events, trying to learn more about what's going on in that space. And at one of the events, our client is not even there. Right. So we're going out and evaluating the industry and trying to understand more about it, so that when these concepts come up from them, we can respond adequately and very, very effectively. And if these concepts are not coming up from them, we have we can present them as opportunities of something we should consider if we have a problem that solution can solve for us. So, we try to learn as much as we can about what's going on in the industry and bring that to them. Most likely they've heard of those things. And, but the more we know about it, we maybe could develop a business case ahead of them and say, this could be worth X million dollars if we tried this. We're also heavily engaged in doing the right thing for our community and the world as well, through our focus on sustainability and human rights and supplier diversity. So, as Best Buy, we have considerable scale to have a huge impact with small changes in those areas. So we're obligated to add those into the mix as well. So, it sounds silly. We try to be everything to them, and we do our best, and we can always do better, but we keep our eyes wide open for sure. So
you mentioned sustainability there. Why is that so important to you and to Best Buy?
Well, for a variety of reasons. I think first and foremost, it's important to our customers. Our customers and our employees. I would say our customers expect that the companies they're spending money with are doing the right thing, to be as brief and direct as possible. I believe that's changing through generations. So millennials will intentionally spend money, generally, with companies that are known for doing the right thing. As one thing we notice, I'm involved with another gentleman that works on Generation Z and understanding the behaviors of Generation Z that's coming up through high school and college right now, is those do the right thing aspects are expected, but they're not their leading decision maker. So if companies have the right product at the right value and can offer the services that they need, then they will spend their money there, but they expect that company does all those right things. So, if you think about Best Buy, there are really three things on why we do it. The first is that we responsibly manage the life cycle of electronics with our customers. If we're pumping electronics into the market and the life cycle of those electronics is getting faster and faster, we see it as our obligation to provide an avenue to recycle things that are at end of life, and we refurbish and reuse and redistribute those things often, through various channels. We also offer sustainable solutions with Energy Star products and tools for our customers to live sustainably in their home, managing their power consumption and their water consumption and so forth. And, the third reason is that we also have a large footprint in the world, like I mentioned earlier.
Right.
And with that scale, we can influence either directly through our purchasing decisions or through influence how our supply chain behaves. And I don't know if I'd call that an obligation. I consider it an obligation.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's a nice thing to have behind us,
Right.
to have that kind of impact.
So when you think about sustainability and kind of bringing it down to the action level so that there's some takeaways that listeners can take, I'm thinking about particular categories that maybe present more of a natural opportunity than others. I wonder if you could share, where there's been a couple of instances, like packaging as an example, or perhaps there's a couple of others out there that really have lent themselves to sustainable initiatives across the supply chain, and how you've approached that.
Yeah, I think, there are several. There are different opportunities in almost every category, but yeah, I'll highlight packaging and maybe a couple others. We've had big wins in packaging materials, specifically focused on our e-commerce boxes. E-commerce is growing rapidly across the industry, and customers are much more comfortable buying through their mobile device or online and having it shipped to home. We embarked on an effort to do a few things in that area, and the first was we right-sized our e-commerce boxes. Every consumer has had the experience where they order something that's about the size of their fist, and it comes in a box that's the size of their television,
right?
and they can't figure out why there are all these air pillows and why that would happen, and it's fairly complicated, but it does happen. And we want to keep getting better at that. And we took a couple steps in right-sizing our e-commerce packaging, and we've implemented some on-demand packaging solutions that help us do that as well, and they cut it to fit the product exactly. We also require FSC-certified corrugate for responsibly sourced pulp for that corrugate, which is good for the just for the overall industry and the paper pulp industry. And, this last year we worked with the Ad Council to encourage recycling through advertising on our packaging that said, I want to be a pizza box.
Right.
And please recycle me.
Yep.
And, I think we can do more. But, the first effort of just right-sizing packaging for us reduced 440 tons of corrugate out of our network, which is pretty substantial. And we still have plenty of room to grow in that area. Other categories, fuel is a focus of our fleet operations, where we shifted from the VW Beetle to the Prius, as well as our trucking operations. In trucking operations, the main opportunity is simply to improve productivity and utilization of the capacity of our trucks so that we can minimize the need for fuel. We continue to explore renewables and other alternative fuels. Another category on the human rights one that's interesting to me, actually overall human rights, we continue to explore indirect categories where there is an inherent risk of human rights issues.
Yeah.
And, you think about it in the manufacturing operation, so, we start to look at indirect, and, that includes offshore operations that support both manufacturing and professional services in various countries around the world and in the U.S., quite frankly. We look at tools and equipment that are prone to conflict minerals, and we've included our expectations and questions in our bids around, where those minerals were sourced, smelting operations in the mines and so forth, and that's been very eye-opening to us. And then more traditional manufacturing concerns in apparel and other goods, where we just want to make sure that our supply chain is following the United Nations guiding principles. So, yeah, and I could go on for about an hour if you'd like.
No, and I guess the follow-up then is, do you feel that it has to be part of some larger initiative from the organization, or are there things that procurement can do? And you talked about some of the things like putting questions in RFPs to understand a little bit more about the depth and the source of things in the supply chain. Is that part of a bigger initiative, or can procurement actually take their own initiative and do things and then roll that up through the organization of just another value lever that they're bringing, so long as it's obviously there's a business impact, there's a business reason to do it as well?
Yeah, I think, we have pretty strong overarching, mandates or imperatives for our organization when it comes to sustainability topics. Yeah. And, so we fall neatly under that umbrella. We have 3 buying channels. One is from OEM manufacturers, and we find that many of our OEM manufacturers have stronger policies and practices than we even do.
Right.
So we allow them to run and work together, and we do have expectations for them. Your typical supplier code of conduct and auditing practices and so forth. The second channel is our exclusive brands. We have a fairly large private label organization, and there we follow the same supplier code of conduct. There we conduct auditing. We monitor our factories, around the world for the products that have our label on it. And then the third channel is our indirect.
Yeah.
And, we've started looking at indirect. We started in 2015, actually, when I took over a champion role for sustainability for indirect purchasing. And within the various areas, we typically go through 2 or 3 steps of an assessment, and the first, maybe 4 steps. So we learn first.
Yeah.
What's possible within each category, which elements of sustainability are pertinent for each category. And then the next step is to really announce our expectations to our vendor community.
Mm-hmm.
And we may not make a decision at that point based on those expectations, but we will announce it and make it clear of what Best Buy stands for. That third step then would be to ask more questions and ask for transparency when we do go to bid or start to procure product. And in that step, we would start to make decisions based on the responses that we get. And the fourth step would then be auditing. And, we're just getting to that point now where we understand our expectations. We've learned more about each category and what we expect. And we know what's possible from an auditing perspective and how to go about doing that. So, hopefully the supplier community will see the value of what we're asking for. And we don't want to cause hardship on our supplier community, but we do have standards that we live up to.
Right.
And they're standards that are accepted across the globe,
Yeah.
so we don't see it as anything beyond anything they would get from other retailers or companies.
What kind of response do you get typically when you're asking for transparency in the supply chain? Because a lot of, as procurement professionals often do, it's kind of information in a negotiation can be seen as power. And there's a little bit of reticence on a supplier behalf to share information that maybe they think will be used against them later. So I'm interested how they respond, or how do you position it and message it to give them confidence that, you're asking for the right reasons.
Yeah, I would say it varies. It varies by company, and it varies by their own principles and how they are going to manage things. The depth that we're going upstream into our supply chain is not about component costs,
right,
for the goods or services. So we're not trying to expose all of that. We already understand should cost analysis and how to back into that at a high level for the primary drivers of cost and whatever we're looking at. I think this is more the corporate social responsibility question, and if it's pretty telling if the vendor is unwilling to provide that, we're probably going to ask a little bit more forcefully.
Right.
If they're forthcoming with responding to those questions, and we've had several vendors that have been very open with that. When we conducted our first bid with conflict minerals expectations, one of our vendors came back with so much information, it took us several days to review it
Right.
and try to get through it. And they knew exactly what we were talking about, and it was really encouraging, quite frankly, that they knew all the smelting and mining operations, the location where and the volume that came from each location. So they had already had those practices in place, and that's what we hope for from our supplier community.
Yeah, I guess for them that do have that those regulations or those processes and the knowledge throughout their supply chain, actually they're probably excited to share that with you once they ask the question, because for them it's a differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's a time to shine, and those are the types of vendors that we expect to have.
What kind of challenges do you say that you have, or you have had, still have, in terms of bringing more sustainable thinking across your supply chain? And that could be internal, but it could also be external, and some of the partners that you're working with.
Oh, yeah. I think it's a variety of things. I would say that the first is just a continued education and buy-in from our stakeholders. As I mentioned earlier, many of them just want us to get the job done. We've got a business to run, that this is all nice. That they may care, but they may not have don't know if I'd say the attention span, but just the luxury of time to go through that. So we'll make progress here and there, and education will be a journey for us. I think balancing the financial needs of our business with the essential greater good kind of items. We were concerned early on that to be a sustainable company would cost more. Mm-hmm. And in some cases it may, and you may choose to hold off or take another path toward that. And renewable energy is a good example of that, right. That for us to invest in our own solar panels on every store in our network isn't feasible, and it doesn't make sense, especially with our leased properties. Yeah. So, we may look at virtual power purchase agreements as another way to approach that. I would say, me as the big picture, no constraints kind of thinker, I inherently want the consumer, when they think of Best Buy, to think of Best Buy as a sustainable company. Yeah. And, so for that to be inherently recognized as a part of our brand is what's important to me. And it's pretty hard to start allocating funding to marketing the sustainable things we do, even when we're doing all kinds of amazing things on this front. We don't always necessarily get the credit that I would like to see us get. Yeah. So, I think that will evolve as new consumers grow to expect that, and it becomes a stronger selling point. And as the investor community starts looking more at sustainable companies to invest in.
Yeah, kind of values that. And actually, I've been one of the podcasts, and I can't tell you which one it was because I just can't remember. But there's an investment product now where you can ensure that the only things that your investment dollars go to are sustainable companies. So I think there's kind of a change. Things are moving in that direction, but for now it's about being where you can have the biggest impact, where you can prove that there's a business case, and tie it into the financials of your stakeholder, while I think just continuing to paint the picture of the impact on brand value as well. Ultimately, I think that's where a lot of this will come in, but it's hard, I guess, to get that data right.
And most often you can find a way to make it financially viable, but it might take patience and some creativity to do that. You find other ways of approaching those situations. So, we've been enlightened on many fronts that we don't have to actually spend more money to be a good company.
Right. So as we start to wrap up, I just had actually one final question. And that's, we talked about all these different value levers of obviously sustainability being one of them, but also the fact that as stakeholders, they're interested in the things that impact them today. As procurement professionals, we work on the things that we're incented to work on. So I was interested how you're able to incent your team to dedicate the time necessary to pursue some of these other value levers that might not immediately lead to cost savings, when cost savings is typically the primary driver of performance, or financial reward, monetary reward, or performance reviews.
Yeah, it's a perfect question. Actually, it is built into our goals in procurement, and every member of our procurement team. Many of our team members are already passionate about these topics and include them in their conversations with their customers. They do things for our company within our corporate offices and so forth, and take part in various activities that are going on here on that front. But we do currently have 20% of our goals tied to corporate social responsibility efforts, and specifically to tangible results that come out of those efforts. So, that type of a program where it rewards those individuals for pursuing those passions and creates an incentive for others that might not be as passionate about it to do something. Otherwise, they're going to miss out on their bonus or a merit increase. People are learning that it's an essential aspect of what we do in procurement. And, I don't think we'd have it any other way.
So what kind of things can you tie CSR into? Is there specific data points that you look for, or is it more, a little bit less intangible, but a feeling that the professional is actually doing everything they can to infuse their supply chain with sustainability?
We had there are many tangible things. First of all, but I'll go back a couple of years ago. We started off with a suite of options of how you could engage and to what depth each individual could engage in supplier diversity or in an environmental sustainability initiative. And those things that required a lot of effort such as hosting a networking event, but those things maybe didn't drive a tangible dollar value or carbon footprint impact. They've still got a number of points allocated to them for that and contributing to the greater effort. We backed off of that program because it really is about tangible results. And we expect people to do those things, and those things have to get done, and we'll find people to do them. But we're tying things to carbon reduction, to fuel reduction, energy consumption, a variety of things that are much more measurable. On the supplier diversity front, it is more clearly aligned to the spend that we have with our diverse supplier community. Yeah, on the human rights side, it is the number of categories that we have launched human rights applications within the bid process. So there are things that we can measure, and the way we structure that program keeps changing a little bit every year as we kind of play around with it and see what works best. And I'm fine with that as long as we keep people engaged.
Right. The important thing is you've shown a commitment that this is important. This is something that your team need to be thinking about. So how it's almost measured is secondary to the action of making it important.
Right. It should be inherently a part of what we do every day. It's part of your natural questions. How much do these things cost? How sustainable are they? That's the rhythm that I've got. Other people aren't quite as simple as I am to the process, but they should be top of mind.
Well, on that note, I know it's time for us to wrap up. So, very last question. I always say this is the easy one. I just wondered if you could share where listeners could find out a little bit more.
I'm fine if you connect with me through LinkedIn. I will tell you that as a procurement professional, I receive dozens of sales calls per day through work email and through LinkedIn. So, if you give me a little context about what you're interested in talking about, I will likely connect with you, especially if it's a sustainability topic. Otherwise, feel free to look for me at the SPLC Summit. I will be there all 3 days, and I'm also chairing the CPO Roundtable, where we're getting procurement leaders together from across industries and regions to talk about the challenges of leading an organization, including sustainability, in our agenda. And as that changes with the new administration in place in the United States, how do some of those challenges change for us? So that should be a pretty enlightening conversation also. But I love talking about these topics.
I imagine so. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tim. What I will do is I will link up to the SPLC Summit. I'll also link up to your LinkedIn profile as well in the show notes for today. Those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/bestbuy. That's artofprocurement.com/bestbuy. And just one last time, thank you very much today for joining me.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks for what you do for the professionals in this space. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.